Today we take up Chapter 40 of the Tao Te Ching. It is one of the most powerful chapters in this Taoist scripture, attributed to the 6th century BC Chinese sage Lao Tzu. It has but 4 lines. In it, Lao Tzu deals with 3 foundational concepts. 1. Return as the movement of the Tao. Return as the movement of the Tao. 2. The superiority of weakness or softness. The superiority of weakness or softness. And 3. The principle of non-being. The principle of non-being. Robert Henrich's translation of Chapter 40 reads, "Reversal is the movement of the Tao. Weakness is the function of the Tao. The things of the world originate in being, and being originates in non-being." Let's consider the first line. Reversal is the movement of the Tao. Other translators render the word reversal as returning. Returning is the movement of the Tao. Ellen Chen says this chapter presents the Tao Te Ching's theology in a nutshell. It will take more than a nutshell for us to expound upon it. Chapters 38 and 39 speak of reversion or returning to the source as the movement by which a being fulfills itself. This chapter identifies reversion as the very life of Tao itself. Chen's view is that reversion is not the creature's return to the source, but the return of the source to the world. My view is that there is a cosmic moment when the creature returns to the Creator and when the Creator returns to the creation. It is a moment when, in Western terminology, man becomes God and God becomes man. This is a mystical truth that we must ponder. The He Shang Gung commentary, Chen says, grasps the dynamic aspect of this line. It says to return is to return to the root. The root is Tao, which is always in motion. In motion, it generates the 10,000 beings, meaning everything that is created. Those that turn their backs on Tao perish. We must never sever the umbilical cord that ties us to the Tao, for we are nourished by the Tao, and only by the Tao, forever. For to me, Tao is the great causal body of the spirit-matter cosmos. It is the body of first cause, of all beginnings and all endings, and all in-betweens. Returning is a great theme of the Tao Te Ching. Chapter 16 speaks of all things returning to their root in the Tao, and thus gaining enlightenment. Wing Sit-chan's translation is, "All things come into being, and I see thereby their return. All things flourish, but each one returns to its root." This return to the root means tranquility. It is called returning to its destiny. To return to destiny is called the eternal Tao. To know the eternal is called enlightenment. Not to know the eternal is to act blindly. This results in disaster. He who knows the eternal is all-embracing. He encompasses the all. Where Wing Sit-chan's translation reads, "To return to destiny is called the eternal Tao," Chen's translation reads, "To recover life is to attain the everlasting. Max Kaltenmark says, "The Taoist teaching on the return is that all creatures issue from the Tao. They are its children, but ineluctably they must return to its womb." Ineluctable means inevitable, irresistible. Just as leaves fall to the root of the tree, become humus, then sap, and re-enter the cycle of life, living creatures emerge into the perceptible world, then return to the realm of the unseen. From the start, however, the holy man stands aloof from this cyclic process. Perfectly empty, perfectly calm, he is the possessor of a spiritual light that makes him altogether different from all other beings. Lacking all particularism, he is indifferent to the realities of this world, but identifies himself with heaven and with the Tao. Now, particularism means having special devotion to a particular interest, exclusive attachment to one's political party, sect, or nation. Particularism is exclusivism or exclusiveness. It is the opposite of all inclusiveness. Particularism or exclusiveness draws a circle and shuts out people and ideas that are unfamiliar. All inclusiveness draws a circle around everybody and lets everybody in. All inclusiveness sees the relationships of people and concepts to the divine whole, the Tao. Particularism relates to the unenlightened self and its narrow view of selfhood outside of the Tao. So Kaltenmark says, lacking all particularism, the holy man is indifferent to the realities of this world, but identifies himself with heaven and with Tao. It is then possible for him to live, if not eternally, at least fearlessly. The law that everything must return to its starting point is universal. Essentially, then, in one of its modes, the Tao is movement. If it were not for this movement, such things as creatures and life could not exist. There could be nothing but an undifferentiated unity. One of my earliest perceptions of the universe and of the universal presence of God was this sense of movement, that by the movement of the worlds and the stars and the suns, and of the cause behind the effect of all these, life itself was generated and perpetuated. It is a wondrous thing to experience movement of blood coursing through our veins, listening to our own heartbeat, observing the agitation and cogitation of the mind, feeling a gentle breeze, seeing the movement of plants and birds and insects and bees. Where there is no movement, there is no life. And where movement is not, there is not the Tao. Through this movement, which is change, undifferentiated unity can become multiplicity and still retain its fundamental unity, the principle of all life. In the I Ching, the hexagram Fu, signifying the return, one yang line beneath 5 yin lines, is the symbol of rebirth of yang. At winter solstice, the yang seems to have disappeared, whereas the yin is at its full. But this is the moment when the yang is reborn and begins its return. Symmetrically, at the summer solstice, the yang is at its apogee of power, while the yin prepares to return. The alternation of the yin and the yang is a going away and a coming back. The phenomenon of life and death of creatures is conceived of in the same way. It too is an alternation of yin and yang, as natural and ineluctable as the succession of day and night. I see this alternation of the yin and the yang as a going away and a coming back, a going out from the spirit cosmos into the matter cosmos, and a coming into the spirit cosmos from the matter cosmos. The soul's going out from the great Tao, or causal body, is the descent. This is a yin, or centrifugal action. It is marked by expansion, growth, and ultimately the full flowering of one's perfect soul pattern, or seed pattern, and reason for being. The soul's coming into the great Tao, or causal body, is the ascent. This is a yang, or centripetal action. It is marked by contraction and the concentration of one's forces as one accelerates being and consciousness in preparation for union with the great Tao. This reunion, or return, is a self-transcendence and the fulfillment of one's reason for being in the spirit cosmos, yang. Whereas in the going out, one is fulfilling his reason for being in the matter cosmos, yin. Looking at it from another perspective, Carlton Mark says, the yang stimulates the vitality of creatures, but the yin brings them back to a state of rest, the peace of the unseen. Conforming to the rhythm of the universe is the prerequisite of wisdom in all Chinese thinking. But the Taoist mystic has greater ambitions than his ordinary compatriots. The question for him is not merely one of adapting his ritual and hygienic observances to the alternation of the seasons. He intends to escape from the determinism of life and death by transcending it. He does not merely witness the return of all creatures to their origin, he precedes them to that origin. Therefore, he is the way shower, the shower of the way of the Tao. Holmes Welch also reviews the meaning of the return. He writes, the returning motion of Tao has many senses. It refers to the cycle of human events by which those who are to be abased are first exalted. Those who are to be abased are first exalted. It refers to the evanescence of every one of the 10,000 creatures, all of which eventually return to a state of non-being. It refers to the way of the Taoist who erases the marks of society and returns to his original nature. Taoist commentator Chung Swan Ying says, when human beings do not lose their purity and are all at ease with themselves, follow their nature, and preserve the principle underlying it, they will be merged with profound Tao. There was an 18th century Taoist adept, a scholar, Liu Yiming, someone I think we all would have liked to have met. He wrote about returning to one's original nature. In his work, Awakening to the Tao, translated by Thomas Cleary, he set forth his innermost contemplations on the Tao. The Tao is most real, he says. First, you should recognize the original human in detail. Seek the original essence inside the temperamental nature. Look for the real body inside the material body. The difference between right and wrong is minute. The deluded all play in the physical body. They take the secondary for the primary. Let us examine his statements. Taoism has at its goal to go back to the point of origin, to recognize the original human in detail. We would have to go back to the creation of the first humans, made in the image and likeness of God and sent forth with bodies superior than those that we now wear. I have glimpsed the scenes of the ancient records of Earth, when Earth was pristine, as a Garden of Eden. There were mystery schools for the educating of new souls. Adam and Eve are archetypal of twin flames sent forth from the great central sun, the Tao, representing the yang and the yin, the masculine and the feminine, as two. These original bodies were merely a step down from the etheric octave, the highest level of being that we experience on earth. We experience that level in the divine memory of God. We experience it perhaps when our bodies sleep at night and we are taken to schools of light. We experience it between embodiments, and we are actually continuously, consciously aware of it. And yet that awareness is below the conscious level of daily awareness. And so to go back to that level means tapping the Akashic records and looking upon these pristine bodies of grace and beauty and symmetry and balance of the yin and yang forces, created by Elohim, as Genesis tells us, created after the image of the divine us, male and female. Elohim is a plural noun for God, showing that made in the image and likeness of God means made in the image and likeness of Father, Mother. Male and female created he them. When we think about the stature and the grace before there was the departure from a consciousness of unity, that is the point of origin, when we first descended from the spirit cosmos into the matter cosmos. This we must contemplate, because these bodies were created after the image of what Lao Tzu calls the One. He says the Tao gave birth to the One as a child. I think of the One as the Holy One of God. I think of a singular one because there is only unity, not plurality, in true being. So we are reminded of the concept of the only begotten Son of God, who is called the Christ. This Christ is a universal principle and a universal being. It is that which came forth from the Tao as sign and signet of the Tao, that we might recognize the Tao through him, her. We are all intended to embody this One, this Holy One of God. It is our true nature. And when we look into the eyes of this One, as that One becomes personified through us, as our inner teacher, we recognize that we are made out of that Christ image. Call this by any other name but Christ, whatever is the religion of your choice, but understand that out of the Father, Mother, God, perpetually in motion, the great Tao, there does descend the individualization of that Tao. If you look at the chart on the screen, you will see a conceptualization of this One. There are 3 figures in the chart. The upper figure represents the great Tao. It is a representation designed to bring the Tao very close to you. You see it as hovering above you. Since there really is no time and space, why should we imagine the Tao anywhere else but where we are? This is a source of great comfort, because it is our source. We came out from it, and we shall return to it. So you see concentric spheres of light. You can imagine them being the size of the vastness of our physical cosmos. And yet, in co-measurement to our being, those spheres of light rest above us. There is a pulsating flame, and the point of the I am that I am in the center. It is in perpetual movement. It fulfills the law of the Tao, of the yang becoming the yin, and the yin becoming the yang. And at each point where yang becomes yin and yin becomes yang, there emerges this Holy One of God. So that Holy One of God is the divine pattern of our own selfhood and personhood. To show that one that was born out of the Tao, we see the center figure in the chart. It may be called the Christ Self, or the Holy One, or the Only Begotten Son, but it is the true and eternal nature of each and every one of us. This Holy Christ Self is so intimate that we hear it as the inner voice of conscience. You can develop a listening ear for that conscience, and this is what Lao Tzu recommends, the listening to the Tao. When we listen to that still small voice, we have unerring guidance. This is our permanent self. Now you look at the lower figure in the chart, and this is you and me as we are today. We are a soul occupying sheaths of consciousness. We can see that we have a physical body. We know that we cogitate and think and reason. We have logic. We know that that is the mind, and we call it the mental body. It is also a body of light that surrounds us. We know that we have feelings and emotions and desires, and we have a desire body. We know that we have a memory, and we sense that we have a memory beyond what we have learned and beyond what we know in this life. We have flashes of insight and a sense of great distances and journeys taken and other octaves visited, and souls we know that we haven't seen in a long time. We sense ourselves a part of universal being. That memory is in the fourth of these bodies. It's called the etheric body or the memory body. So these are four interpenetrating sheaths of consciousness whereby we tap in to the memory, the mind, the desire, and the body of the Tao and the one who came forth from the Tao. This is non-permanent being. This is the house of the soul, and of the soul, as the Gnostics teach us, that has fallen from grace and gone out of the way of the Tao, if you wish to use that terminology. And so our sojourn on earth is to take that soul to the place where she can attain reunion with the Holy One of God, with her real and true identity, made in that image and likeness of that one, that Christ Self. The reason we are seekers, seeking self-knowledge and truth, and understanding that that knowledge comes to us through the great mystics and teachers of all time. We know that we seek because our souls desire union. Our souls desire the return. And that's what chapter 40 of the Tao Te Ching is all about. Only through the return do we fulfill our reason for being. That is Lao Tzu's message today. How do we achieve it? This chart explains it. Draw nigh to me, and I will draw nigh to you. Whether you call the originator of that word Brahman, or Father, Mother, or the Tao, or the great Shekinah glory, we know that if we place ourselves in a mode of spirituality, meditation, of grace, and of peace, we will be closer to God than when we entertain the opposite. And so the middle figure in the chart, as that Holy One of God, becomes closer and closer to us, not as I would describe it in distance, but in vibration. And since things equal to the same thing are equal to each other, if we put on and maintain the vibration of the balance of the yin and yang forces, that is really the definition of that Christ, then there will be no separation from us and that Christ, that Holy One. And so if we decide that every step we take in every day of our life, every walk, be a walk in that peaceful presence and that peace-commanding presence, so we will find ourselves merging with that Holy One of God. Jesus was the full incarnation of that Christ, that only begotten Son. He never ever exclaimed that he was the only one who had that only begotten Son of God. Nor is it so written in Scripture. The Scriptures have been misunderstood and misinterpreted, that the physical man Jesus was the only begotten Son of God. Jesus is not only our Master, he is our brother. And as our brother, he says to us, "What I am, you must become. I have come here to show you an example, and I am the example to all people of all walks of life, of all races and kindreds and tongues." Jesus tells us that our souls must become reunited to that real self. We have let go the hand of our real self. Now we must establish that bonding. This is the purpose of our life today. And to help us understand it better, we are considering in this series of Summit University lectures the concepts of Taoism, another approach, another road to the same center and the same source. Now, as you walk and talk with that voice of God, that presence of God, that is that Christ self, and you are one with that Christ, very soon the Father, Mother God represented in the upper figure in the chart, also walks with you and becomes part of you. So that your goal is that these three figures in the chart become one. And you can do this because you have free will and because of other elements that come from the Tao that we are going to take up in this lecture. So, what this great scholar tells us is to seek the original essence inside the temperamental nature. Sometimes we get fed up with ourselves or with others because all of us are so human. But inside of our humanness, there is still that original divine matrix, that original pattern. The original essence we are taught by the adepts of the Far East is a spiritual light, a kindling flame, fire for fire. As we have that fire, so through it we attain oneness with our own higher being, the great Tao. And so he told us to seek the original essence. It is difficult to find. We begin by fanning its flame through devotion to any particular profile of God that inspires you, whether it is Krishna or Lord Gautama or Mother Mary or any of the saints. Devotion to one who has realized God and who has re-entered the Tao establishes our link to the Tao. These great ones who have gone before us are our teachers and our elder brothers and sisters. We call them ascended masters because they have ascended or accelerated out of the matter cosmos into the spirit cosmos. They have returned to the Tao. Just exactly what chapter 40 is talking about. Look for the real body inside the material body. The real body is not 1,000,000 miles away from you. It can be congruent with you, but you must become self-emptied so that you can be filled. The real body. The difference between right and wrong is minute. It is the razor's edge of that Holy One of God. It is the Christ mind that divides between absolute good and evil or relative right and wrong. He observes the deluded all play in the physical body. They take the secondary for the primary. The primary body that is yours is that middle figure in the chart, the Holy Christ self. The secondary body is the flesh and blood we wear. Why did God give us these bodies? Why are we in this density of matter? Very simple, because we have set causes in motion that have created effects here on earth in physical bodies in previous incarnations. We come back to the scene of our crime, as it were. We come back to the scene where we made good and bad karma. We come back for resolution. We cannot have resolution with the great Tao unless we have resolution one with another. And so we are assigned to Earth's schoolroom, to different compartments where we can attain this resolution. And if the desire does not grow strong in us by the joy and the bliss of God, then it grows strong by the pain of His absence that quickens us and awakens us and makes us desire to find that resolution until it becomes the great burning desire of our lives, to attain resolution within our being with all other beings, and thereby to attain resolution with our source.
You're watching Elizabeth Clare Prophet, world-renowned author and founder of Summit University. Summit University is located at the beautiful Royal Teton Ranch in Park County, Montana, just north of Yellowstone National Park. If you'd like more information, call 800-323-5228. That's 800-323-5228.
Liu Yiming goes on to say, when an infant is born, it has no conscious knowledge, no attachment to pleasures and possessions, no sentimental bonds. This would be true, of course, if it were the first time the infant were born, the first time that soul came forth out of the spirit cosmos. But since we have been coming forth and returning again and again, we find ourselves today at that point where, when we are born, we do have conscious knowledge. We know where we came from, what our assignment is, what we must fulfill in this life. We have attachment, first of all, to taking milk from our mother's breast, and we have a sense of possessiveness of that breast. And then all of our attachments and our possessiveness go back to previous embodiments, to people and situations that we are attached to because of both positive and negative karma. So we do have sentimental bonds. In other words, we don't come back in the great Taoist ideal of absolute innocence. Nevertheless, there is a level of innocence because God draws the curtain on our memory and does not give us in each succeeding lifetime the memory of the past. Nevertheless, we bring our psychology with us, our emotions, what we have developed, whether it is the mind or the soul, our momentums of good and bad. But continuing on his theme, for we understand where he's coming from, we read then what he has to say. It knows nothing of wealth or poverty, has no ideas of self, person, being, or life. For the infant, everything is open, nothing defiles it, for it is indifferent, equanimous, purely natural. We can modify that with our understanding of the colorations of previous experience. Liu Yiming says, what I realize as I observe this is the Tao of the restoration of innocence. The Tao of the restoration of innocence for me is entering into meditation upon universal being as that real self, that Holy One of God. Meditation upon the great Tao. As I meditate on it and become one with it, I feel that restoration of my innocence. I can contain my innocence that I knew in the beginning with God, and yet retain entirely what is that has formed me, my personality, my background, and all of the influences, good and bad. So we can dip into that innocence, and we should attempt to do so daily by lifting our thoughts to other octaves where there is an acceleration of that light. He says if people are able to radically wake up and turn around, shedding attachment to things, this is the restoration of youth, the original state of the infant. Otherwise, one's natural reality is lost, even if one is physically strong and fat as a pig or an ox. What is the benefit? Liu Yiming is saying, if you are not contacting your real self and fulfilling your reason for being, then what good is it to be stuffed with everything you could ever want to eat, or with the material possessions you could ever need? At some time or other, we have all felt lonely in a crowd. I remember feeling very much alone in a New York subway when I received a great and sorrowful message whereby I was grieving. And I never felt so alone as I felt in that crowded subway. No matter how many people surround us, no matter how busy we are, if we are not in touch with our real self, if we are not moving toward that goal of reunion with a great Tao, through our special mission in life, we experience an excruciating alienation from all others and from our reason for being. What is that sense of alienation and aloneness telling us? We must ponder our pain and our separateness until they speak to us and tell us why. Our conclusion must be, severed from our source, like a cucumber that is severed from the vine. We have no life in us, we have no reinforcement of our true nature. This world does not reinforce our true nature, but what is above us in vibration, whose vibration we seek to become, does reinforce us. That Holy Christ self and the Holy Christ flame burning in our hearts. That reinforces our true being, our contemplation of the I am that I am, being where we are. That reinforces who we are. We substitute many inventions of a pseudo-self in place of the real self. The real self can only be known through the oneness with the Tao. Liu Yiming compares our natural state of being one with the Tao to a piece of pottery. He says pottery has a basic constitution and is formed without artifice. Decorate it with colors, inlay it with gold and jade, and though it may be beautifully adorned, it has lost its basic constitution. What I realize as I observe this, he says, is the Tao of returning to simplicity, going back to purity, going back to the essential nature of a thing. We could add to this, perhaps the embellishments of art, our irreverent attempt to glorify the Tao and restore the beauty of its original image and likeness. It is evident in this teaching that Tao is in the eye of the beholder. As we sit and contemplate what this Tao might be, each one of us has a unique sense of that Tao. If we all took out paint and paper and began to paint our concept of it, we would each have a unique rendering. Liu Yiming says the basic constitution of human beings, when they are born, is pure and flawless. But when it mixes with temporal conditioning, senses and objects are activated. Intellectual knowledge opens up. Added to this are accumulating habits and attachments. People pursue their ambitions with all sorts of scheming and cleverness, follow their desires with deceit and hypocrisy. All of their doings, all of their actions are in pursuit of the false. They take what is painful for pleasure, take poison for medicine. Their original basic constitution is completely buried away. This goes to such an extreme that they lose their health and forfeit their lives without a care, bringing calamity and misfortune on themselves without even realizing it. This is why the ancient sages taught people to understand the good and go back to the beginning, to return to simplicity and purity, simply to restore the original state. When you restore the original state, you are clean and naked, bare and untrammeled, without a trace of defilement, having shed clinging to objects entirely. This state is the embryo of sagehood, the seed of immortal enlightenment. This is what is called the real human being. If there is such a thing as a real human being, it is that one born out of the Tao, the middle figure in the chart, who is your real self. For us to become that real, quote, human being, we must become a mirror image and reflection of it. The saints have taught that the soul is a mirror or a clear reflecting pool. God has given us the ability to mirror our real self, but we decide to do it or not to do it by free will. About cultivating this real human being and uprooting the artificial, Liu Yiming says, when you cut weeds, it is necessary to dig out the roots. For if the roots are not eliminated, the weeds will regrow. When you plant trees, it is necessary to nurture the roots, for if the roots are not firm, the trees will wither. Thus I realize the Tao of eliminating the artificial and cultivating the real. The artificial is like weeds. People's basic essence and natural goodness are what is real. The real is like a tree. When you get rid of the artificial, it is necessary to root out all personal desires and habit energies. Only then will they not regrow. The wisest of the masters we know have taught us this identical truth. If you leave even the slightest pollution, eventually it will grow insidiously, gradually increasing and causing great harm. A single cell of cancer in the human body, if not removed, can cause the death of the whole body. And how many of us have mourned the death of those who have made their exit because of this? So is the spread of AIDS and other dread diseases for which there is no cure. So there is the disease of the psyche and the mind and the heart. And sometimes we play precipitously on the very edge of reality and unreality, thinking if we taste just a little bit of the world, or the little bit of sin, or a little bit of death and hell, that we are strong enough to resist when it has gained entrance to our being. We are strong enough to overcome it. There are so many analogies in life that tell us otherwise, that if we want to become real, we dare not reserve room for points of unreality in our being. When you cultivate the real, it is necessary to be constantly aware of the fundamental root of inherent natural reality, nurturing it at all times. Here is the stressing of nurturing. Why do we nurture the Tao within us? Why do we nurture the one who came forth from the Tao? Because at this level of existence, this is not the natural habitat of that one and of that Tao. Therefore, it is a very delicate flower. We must irrigate it with the water of the Spirit, keep it warm with the fire of truth, not letting it be moved or disturbed, protecting it in every way, watching out for its safety in every condition. In other words, it is fragile. The spiritual presence within us is fragile. It is like a tiny candle that the wind can blow out so easily. When you nurture the root until it is stable and firm, when the energy is full and the spirit is complete, only then can you be immune to the influence of myriad things and the burden of myriad affairs. There will be no trouble after that. Therefore, when you eliminate artificiality, you must reach the point where there is no artificiality at all. Just as when you cut weeds, you must eliminate the roots entirely. When you cultivate reality, you must reach the point where there is no unreality at all. Just as when you plant trees, you must make the roots firm and deep. It is a major challenge in life to challenge every unreality, every delusion, every illusion. We gather our garments of unreality and our delusions and illusions around us to insulate ourselves from the pain of true knowledge, self-knowledge, and knowledge of the world and the things that are coming upon the world. We insulate ourselves with this delusion and illusion. It is a particular affliction of the American people under the planet Neptune. We must beware of this. We would rather engage in forays into soap operas, into fiction, into base types of behavior, into activities that are warped and distorted, as an escape from the responsibilities we have. Our first responsibility is to be who we are. And if we will be who we are, then we will take up the responsibility of balancing our karma and not walking away from it irresponsibly. We will take up the challenge of rooting out all divisions in our psyche. We will take responsibility for them, and we will not blame them on what someone else has done to us in this or any past life. Being responsible for ourselves is the American way. It is the way of independence and the independent spirit. We ought to consider this. We should not insulate ourselves against emotional pain, mental anguish. We should deal with it directly and not escape it. And in so doing, we will draw nigh to that one who is real, contains the perfection of God and the bliss of God and the awareness of our pain. That one is the mediator. You see, if we have the courage to face pain, just beyond pain and its resolution is the bliss of God. If we refuse to know pain, we will never come to the bliss. An ancient scripture says, as long as there is the slightest negative energy remaining, you will not become immortal. As long as there is the slightest positive energy remaining, you will not die. This is truly real. Returning to the Tao and uncovering the real self are not easy. This has been called the mighty work of the ages. Karma and attachment to the unreal self are the chief obstacles. This is why the Apostle Paul said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. There are depths of being where when we enter there to slay the demons of the night, we may have fear and we may tremble. But when we understand our relationship to the Tao and the one born out of the Tao, and when we have this chart to look at to remind us just how near and dear is eternal life from whence we came, we can descend to those sub-basements of being, deal with the inner conflicts, and emerge whole. Holmes Welch says, the returning motion of the Tao also refers to another kind of return. This is a return that the Taoist makes in trance to non-being itself. What is non-being? What is this concept of non-being? And how does it figure in Taoism? In Taoist thought, non-being is not a negative quality. It describes unrealized potentiality. Unrealized potentiality. A state of emptiness that is really fullness. Non-being is so called because it is nameless and indescribable. Non-being denotes the absolute transcendence of the Tao. Welch says, the experience of the return to non-being sounds like the final stage of trance, as other mystics have reported it. I call this state cessation. In a sense, all states of trance can be thought of as progressive cessation. When the material world has ceased, a man can have visions. Ceased meaning ceased to occupy his consciousness. When you no longer have the records of millions of frames of TV and motion pictures and all kinds of inharmonious sounds, etc., parading in the unconscious and in the memory body. When you are emptied of these, then you have visions of the higher octaves. We so fill ourselves with the images of this lesser world that we do not have room for these visions. He says when visions have ceased, he can sense God. When he himself has ceased, he can merge with God. And when God has ceased, that must be the last stage in the progression, though it sounds impious. And yet I think the last stage is something like that. In it there is neither desire nor rejection of desire, neither ideas nor absence of ideas, neither ecstasy or pain. There is, in fact, neither self nor being. There is simply consciousness that all these have ceased, consciousness, one might say, of non-being. This is Holmes Welch continuing. This is like the nirvana of Buddha. Consider how Buddha testified on the progress of cessation. He said, "I have conquered all. I have known all. I am above all relativities. I have abjured everything. I am freed from thirst. My mind is tranquil. I have extinguished everything." Buddha said at another time, "In seeking for salvation, I have reached in experience the nirvana which is unborn, unrivaled, secure from attachment, undecaying, unlamenting, and unstained." In one sense of the word, God ceasing to exist takes you to the extremes to which students of Taoism have taken Taoism. In one sense, what I have just read to you is like the denials of metaphysics, until you deny yourself and God out of existence. But is it really? As I contemplated this is what came to me. When you attain union with God, and when you are one with the Tao or God as an objective reality has ceased to be. It has now become a subjective reality. When you become one with God, God ceases to be. It's almost that in that subject reality, in that subjective reality, you don't know that you are God, because it is subjective. On another strain of Taoist teaching, the concept of that full union with God is extremely profound, and I will get to it in a moment. So in this sense of the word, of becoming God, as we began in the beginning with the idea, God becoming man and man becoming God, the teaching I've just read to you is neither blasphemous nor metaphysical, but simply another way to state one's self-realization in God. Translator R.B. Blakeney's comment on chapter 40 is, "It is worth noting that while Chinese customs set the golden age in the past, this return does not necessarily mean going back by imitating the primitive ancients. Well, we know that long before the ancients were primitive, they were highly evolved, masterful beings. So there is a great height of God awareness at one point in past golden ages, then a descent to a primitive level, and now hopefully an ascent again. So the mystic in China, as elsewhere, was interested in exploring the roots as well as the fruits of life in an effort to know the ultimate truth about himself and everything else. It is rather a return to within oneself, where the ultimate mystery of being can eventually be confronted.
For more information on the mystical paths of the world's religions, call toll-free 1-800-323-5228. The preceding program was presented by Summit University, Box A, Livingston, Montana, 59047 1390. If you'd like to know more, call this number or write this address. For your free copy of Elizabeth Clare Prophet's best-selling book, The Human Aura, call this toll-free number, 1-800-323-5228. This is a limited-time offer, so call now for your free book. That's 1-800-323-5228.